Hello and welcome to Two Beers Till Takeoff. My name is Phil, and before getting into the episode, I just wanted to address the elephant in the room. If you haven't noticed, Brandon has left the show, and moving forward, I will be the host of Two Beers Till Takeoff. I wish Brandon nothing but the best in his future endeavors. To the listeners, I've seen your increased support in the past month, and I just want to say thank you for sticking around. I'm so excited for you guys to hear the upcoming episodes. Delivering high-quality, commercial-free episodes is unfortunately not free. So if you'd like to support the podcast, you can check out the Two Beers Till Takeoff Patreon page, where for as low as 16 cents a day, you can help the podcast grow. And for a free option, if you still want to help to support the podcast, you can support by giving the show a 5-star rating and leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell your friends so together we can make this the #1 travel podcast. I've been talking it up, I guess, in the last few episodes. I'll be telling you about one of the craziest experiences of my life. My experience with the world's most powerful psychedelic, ayahuasca. So now let's move forward to the more intense portion of the story. Let's talk about ayahuasca. So, what is ayahuasca? Ayahuasca is a South American psychedelic tea that is made by combining two plants found in the Amazon and boiling them for 10 to 14 hours. At the end of the boil, there's approximately 1 liter of ayahuasca. You may know ayahuasca by its nickname, the spirit drug, or its active ingredient, DMT, short for dimethyltryptamine. Interestingly enough, DMT is naturally produced in the human brain, more specifically in the pineal gland, and is present when we are dreaming. Ayahuasca has been consumed for centuries by tribes in South America for their spiritual ceremonies. Even religions have emerged with ayahuasca use at the forefront in these regions. The drug does have a limited amount of research, but users have been known to use this drug to treat PTSD, anxiety disorders, and depression. Now that you know a bit more about ayahuasca, let's get into the story. So, for those who haven't heard the start to the Peru story, stop this episode and go listen to it. It's titled, I Got Engaged/Robbed in Peru. So a quick recap for those who have listened to the episode is day 1 in Peru. My bag never showed up. My bag that had all the stuff for our jungle trek and our mountain adventures. And then day 2, my phone got robbed on the way to the airport at knife point. So I was without my bag and all my stuff and without my phone. The itinerary was that I was going to the jungle with Sid for a week. My girlfriend Jacqueline was going to join us for the mountainous portion of the trip 1 week later. So this story starts in Iquitos. Iquitos, for those who don't know, is the city that is the biggest city that you can't reach by vehicle or by foot. You need to get there either by boat or by plane. So it's quite remote and it's right by the Amazon. So when Sid and I got to Iquitos, we jumped into a tuk-tuk. The tuk-tuk driver was like, hey, are you guys interested in a jungle tour? Which we were. And he's like, I know a company and I can, set you up with this company. And you can go see if it's a good fit. So we get there, get to talking to the jungle tour guide, and he's explaining everything, the things that we're going to see, the things that we're going to experience, kind of just walking through the jungle experience. And he mentioned doing ayahuasca as an option for our time in the jungle. So Sid and I had talked about doing ayahuasca before going, kind of loosely, but we hadn't really decided if we were going to do it or not. And at the time when I was sitting in the jungle tour office, having a beer with Sid and this tour guide, I honestly was not in the right headspace to do ayahuasca. I knew ayahuasca was like this intense psychedelic, and everything that I like, for me, in terms of drugs, I've literally just smoked weed and taken edibles. I've never done any psychedelics. I've never done any hard drugs. So the things that I've heard from psychedelics is that you need to be in the right mind space to do psychedelics. And ayahuasca being the strongest psychedelic on earth, I definitely was not feeling the best or ready to embark on this experience. So we decided, you know what, we're going to skip doing ayahuasca. We're going to go to the jungle. We're going to experience what the Amazon has to offer, and that'll be it. So we leave Iquitos. We start on our journey to our jungle huts in the middle of the Amazon. And after about a day, Sid and I kind of look at each other. You know, there's a feeling you get when you kind of go back to nature. You connect with nature. You know what I mean? There's a relaxing feeling. There's a reason people go and, you know, have vacations in cabins or in the middle of nowheres, because you're completely disconnected. I, for one, didn't have a phone. So it was, I at that point, I was like, you know what? I think I'm relaxed enough to consider taking ayahuasca. And Sid felt the same way. He was like, yeah, you know what? This is the right setting. Our jungle tour company was really good. And you can just tell that, or just having talked to another few people that had done it through the tour, they said that it was really good. There was a 72-year-old shaman that came and helped you along your trip. And so we were, I guess, more open to the idea. And so we talked to our tour guide and he said, all right, we're interested in doing ayahuasca. What do we do? So he's like, all right, well, to even get to the ayahuasca trip, you have to prepare. You can't just walk into doing ayahuasca. You have to. So I think from a bit of research, most people recommend staying off processed foods, alcohol, or meat for 1 month before doing ayahuasca. So we only had a couple days left in the Amazon. So our guy said, listen, if you can stay clean for 2 days of meat, processed foods, and alcohol, he said, you should be fine to do ayahuasca. So that's what we did. The next 2 days, we didn't do those things. And on the last night before doing the ayahuasca trip, we had to skip supper. So I guess to give you an image of where we were in the jungle, like our jungle huts were essentially bungalows. So there's a 4 or 5 bungalows, and then there's a meal hall, and then there's kind of this little jungle hut where they do the ayahuasca ceremonies. So the ceremonies are typically done at night. And, you know, where we were staying, there was a lot of other people. So what they did is they actually said everybody had to go back to their rooms. Everybody had to turn off their lights. They had to be silent in order for us to do this experience. It was that intense. And I can remember Sid and I, we were just pacing, getting ready to do this experience. I think we were having moments of clarity, realizing that we were miles away from a hospital. We were, you know, there's no service. I guess in hindsight, it might have been a little bit dangerous, but just having known that there was other people at the that were doing the jungle tours that had done it with them made us feel a little bit better about that. So eventually all the lights go out. We sit down with the shaman and he starts to tell us about the experience, what's going to happen. He explains that it's going to take about 20 to 30 minutes for the tea to take action, and then we can expect to probably vomit, and then we're kind of off to the races onto the experience. So you can just imagine Sid and I were sitting on these little cushions, sitting next to one another, with the shaman facing us, and our tour guide Frank in the background, just ready to translate if need be. And so we take the tea, and the tea itself was terrible. It tastes essentially like dirt. It's like a thick dirt going down your throat. It's fucking gross. And after you take it, or I guess before you take it and after you take it, the shaman continuously tells you, you know, focus on why you want to be here. Prepare questions for like that to be answered. And so, yeah, just focus on why you're here, why you're here, why you're here, why you're here. And as the experience starts to happen, the first thing I noticed that happened to me was I started to feel like sweaty. Like I was sweating quite a bit. I was starting to feel, you know, the feeling when you kind of are on the verge of vomiting, you kind of start to feel weak. Your hands kind of start feeling weird. Your extremities start feeling weird. And I can also remember the first weird thing to happen to me was that I could hear crickets, right? We're in the middle of the jungle. We're in this jungle hut and there's no sound, right? Every other person that's there is in bed or sleeping or whatever. And the only thing you can really hear is crickets. And the first thing that really made the experience weird, or I was just like, oh, it's starting, was that the cricket sound doubled and then it tripled and then it quadrupled. So it became no longer just a sound. It became a vibration. And I know people, if I was listening to this right now, I would probably be like, this guy's crazy. What the hell? But listen, look into it. There's a lot of other people that do this. I'm not the first person to do this. It's starting to be, I guess, discovered by Western people now. And it's an experience. So the humming started, and then all of a sudden, I just felt like someone had just put me in a spaceship and just pressed the gas to the pedal to the metal. And I was just going through space, just like, holy fuck. I can't control myself. Like, holy shit. And yeah, that probably went on for, time was kind of hard to say, but it went on for a little bit. And following that, I started to puke. And yeah, puking's not fun. Puking was I thought puking was going to be the worst part of this experience, I thought that the puking would make me not want to do the experience. But looking back, it's so minor. There's so many benefits that outweigh the negatives in terms of puking. Puking's nothing. And yeah, so after you're done puking, if I opened my eyes, I could see visions, like formations, just there was some stuff in my vision that was blocking my eyes. It's pretty weird. First time experiencing that. So it was pretty weird. But, and so eventually after I stopped puking, I got to this place where I wasn't going 1,000 miles an hour and I was just there. And I was then able to communicate with something and it would answer my questions. So the format that it would give me, or I guess the format that I would see in my brain when I was closing my eyes, was that I would bring up a topic, or the thing would bring up a topic, and then it would give either green for good, and then a percentage of how good that was. And if it was bad, it would do red, and then would do a percentage. And so it started to do every single facet of my life. It was like a complete 360 in terms of friends, family, work, questions about myself, like spouse, just every single thing that you can imagine of your life. It was telling me if this was good, if it was bad. And yeah, it was completely insane. So just a bit of precursor. So the 2 nights before Sid and I decided to do ayahuasca, we were drinking. We were the only tour guide or tour group that brought drinks, but we were having some drinks with a few guys, and or Sid asked me, he's like, Phil, when are you going to get married? And then I was just like, you know what? Like, I don't know why, like, I haven't done it before. Like, I've been with my partner for 5 years, and I was just like, yeah, like, what have I been waiting for? Like, you know, we've been together for so long and I love her, and like, yeah, that's a good idea. And so one of the guys that we were drinking beer with was saying, oh, like, you said you were going to, you know, Humante Lake and Machu Picchu. He said both those places would be amazing places to propose. And so he's like, dude, like, definitely, like, he said, do Humante Lake where I proposed, because there's less people there, but it's so beautiful. That's like that'd be an amazing place to propose. And so back to the trip, my girlfriend Jacqueline comes up in my brain in the, I guess, the evaluation, and she comes up negative. She comes up like 54% negative. And that was really confusing to me, because like, I was like, I didn't even bring it up. Like, you're the one who kind of told me to look at, that you're the one who introduced Jacqueline. Like, I was like, you know, 2 nights before I decided that I was going to propose to her. I think if you're proposing to someone, you obviously know how you feel about that person. There's, you know, no doubts that you want to be with this person. And so all of a sudden, this thing that was telling me what's right and wrong in my life was saying Jacqueline is negative. And it also told me that I had to break up with her on this trip. And that's when I started having a bad trip, because I was planning to propose and it was telling me to do the opposite. And then so eventually I got pissed off at this being, and I was like, well, screw you. Like, this ayahuasca is going to wear off eventually. And when it does, like, I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want. You can't control me. And so the ayahuasca person retaliated by saying, well, if you don't do this, if you don't break up with her on this trip, you are going to get married and have a kid in the next 3 years, and she's going to divorce you. And it even showed me a picture of a guy that she was going to be with. And that's when I was starting to lose my shit. So my eyes were closed, sitting on this cushion, sitting next to Sid in the dark, and just bawling my eyes out. I was just so upset, because it was essentially going to ruin my life. I was just so distraught and was just like, fuck this, man. This is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And so it would, you know, try to continue and start to talk about new stuff. And it would bring up other topics. And I'd continuously always go back to Jacqueline. Jacqueline would always be negative. And I'd be like, what the fuck? And towards the end of it, we went to another topic. I went back to Jacqueline, and miraculously, Jacqueline was no longer red. Jacqueline was green, 99%. And then I was like, what the hell was this? And the being told me this was a test. This was a test to see how much you would fight for your future wife, and you passed. She's your soulmate. Congratulations. And it was one of the most intense things I've ever experienced in my life. I've never been more sure that I want to do this now. But it was just so intense and just so crazy. After that happened, obviously it felt really good. And yeah, it was fucked. So interestingly enough, having talked to other people that have done this experience, they had said that you talk to you talk to an entity, and then at the end it gives you like a list of things you need to prioritize, which it did for me too. So, and interestingly enough, on that list, Jacqueline was only number 2. Number 1, it told me that it told me not to freak out, but that I needed to focus on this thing, and it was cancer. And it said, you have cancer, it's minor, and you have to go get it checked when you get back to Canada. And so I was like, what the hell? And the shaman that was sitting between Sid and I, or facing, he was kind of like, we were like in a triangle, right? So he's kind of looking at me and Sid, and anyway, so he's playing, this whole time he's singing, and he's got this little plant thing that he's whacking on his hand that's just making like a noise. Apparently it's plant power or something, I don't know. And what he would do is when you were going through something difficult, he'd come and do like a solo session on you. And when that thing told me that I had cancer, or I had cancer in my body and I needed to fix it, he came right up to me and he put his hand on the back of my head. And the weird thing is that I do have a mole on my on my head. It's just not in the back of my head. It's on the side of my head. And in hindsight, it had like been painful. Maybe like a few months prior to this experience. And so when the shaman put his hand on the back of my head, I thought in my head, that's not the right spot, because I could feel the mole on the side of my head pulsating. And right when I said that in my head, never communicated to the guy, he moved his hand from the back of my head directly onto the mole on the side of my head, which is covered by hair in the middle of the dark, and no words were exchanged. Doesn't fucking make sense. I know it sounds weird. I was as weirded out as you were. And yeah, when he touched it, he was smoking this big cigarette thing. It's like natural tobacco, and he was just blowing smoke on it, and it just made it feel good. And yeah. So I guess I'm in the process of that. So I guess I'll keep you guys updated. But yeah, in terms of the experience itself, I honestly had a good time with, like, once I was talking to the entity, and I didn't think that my girlfriend was going to dump me, or I was going to have to dump my girlfriend. It was honestly a good experience. Like, I remember like laughing with the entity, like telling jokes. He'd tell me jokes. Like, I remember at one point, like, kind of being like, this is just so cool. Like, holy shit. And being like, oh yeah, if you're able to tell the future, what are going to be the lottery numbers? And I remember in my brain, there's just 2 middle fingers that came up, and were like, fuck you. This isn't why you're here. And, there was other times when I wasn't asking the right questions, or questioning that the entity was real or not. Like, I was like, this is bullshit. Like, this isn't real. And it would make me tick. Like, my right shoulder would just tick, 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 tick. It's almost like it was shaking me to ask the right questions. And there's another time I remember I was like questioning, be like, this isn't fucking real. Like, whatever. Like, I don't believe you. And you know, when you close your eyes, especially when you're in the dark, you close your eyes, all you kind of see is just black. And that's what I was seeing. But my eyes were closed, and to show its presence, it was like flashing lights on and off. Like if somebody had a flashlight in your eyes and it was flashing it on and off. That's what it felt like, but there was nobody with a flashlight. Like it was really fucking weird. And yeah, like I said, this experience lasted approximately 3 to 4 hours with the shaman. And in total, it takes usually 3 to 6 hours. And what was really weird for me is that throughout this whole process, the shaman was singing. And like I said, he was whacking this plant thing. He's singing. And I remember the entity speaking to me and being like, hey, like the experience is almost over. Ask your last questions. Like this, I'm about to leave, so just ask your last questions. And I was like, okay, so asking more questions. And then it was like, okay, last question. I'm almost gone. Like, what's your last question? And I asked my last question, and then the shaman stopped just like that, stopped singing, stopped hitting his little plant thing, and he's like, terminado. Experience is over. And then I opened my eyes. I was still hallucinating a little bit, but largely the experience in my head was not happening anymore. And yeah, it was pretty fucked. For me, like I said, I had personal reasons why I wanted to do this experience. And for me, I think it was, I left there feeling like I had 1,000 pounds off my shoulders. It was an experience that for me, it was therapeutic. A lot of people, from what I've read after doing the experience, is they explain that it's something that it's like forced therapy. When you're communicating to this being, it's like it knows you better than you know yourself, and you're not able to bullshit, or you can't admit the bullshit that you sometimes tell yourself. And it's like being the most honest you've ever been with yourself. And I think because of that and the solutions that it provided, it was, since then I felt really good. I obviously, like, after you come back from a vacation, go back to work, you obviously feel pretty good, right? You've been off for a little while, but it's definitely something that's been really helpful, I think. So, but I guess in terms of people, if you're interested in doing this experience, I'm not on here to say that it's something that's for everyone. It can be potentially fatal from what I've read, is that it can be fatal if you combine it, or you don't do if you would combine it with other drugs, or if you don't have a real shaman. Apparently those things can really be beneficial, or the setting is really beneficial as well. But if you don't do a bit of research into where you're going to do this, who you're going to do it with, it can be potentially bad. So definitely watch out for that. And like I said, I'm not condoning or saying to do this. But if you are, definitely do your research. And in terms of if you're ready to do it, you got to really ask yourself, am I ready to go through this journey? Because it's not just smoking weed or something. It's definitely 100x times that, in terms, obviously it's a different experience, but it's just in terms of the time, the length of the experience, the intensity of the experience, it's just so much more. So you gotta, there's an old Indian guy that was at the Jungle Hut, and I think he gave me the best advice right before. And he said, when you're doing this, you're probably going to be like, oh fuck, I don't want to be doing this right now. You're going to feel uneasy, right? You're going to vomit. You're going to feel wheezy. You're not going to feel good for some portions of this. You're going to also feel really good. But just know that once you've taken this tea, you can't get out. It's not like a shitty movie you watch on Netflix that you can turn off at any time you want. You have to fucking finish that movie, no matter if it's good or bad. So keep that in mind if you consider doing that. Iquitos is considered, I guess, a mecca of ayahuasca ceremonies or ayahuasca places. So definitely try to at least meet with the people that you're going to be doing and get some information about the ceremonies themselves. And definitely you want to be safe when you're doing this. As I said also in the beginning, that there's churches that are now kind of centered around ayahuasca. From what I looked up, you can actually do ayahuasca in a lot of countries where it's considered illegal. If you do join that church, for example, in Canada, there's, I think it's like Santo Dia. Anyways, just Google ayahuasca church if you're interested, and you can join that church and then experience ayahuasca. In Peru, it's actually, where I did it, was actually considered legal, and it's like I said in the beginning, it's culturally accepted. Having talked to some people from that region, they said ayahuasca is kind of just something that they do on a yearly basis, where they're able to kind of just reconnect and recenter and maybe deal with some stuff that's bothering them. Anyways, I hope you guys thought that this was informative and entertaining. This was definitely, like I said, one of the craziest experiences of my life. In terms of doing it again, I don't know if I don't think I need to do it again right now. But maybe somewhere down the line, maybe it's like something you do every 10 years just to figure out what's going on. But yeah, it's not something that you finish and you're like, yeah, I want to do that again right away. Like I said, be safe, and we'll catch you next week on another episode of the Two Beers Till Takeoff. Actually, next week, we are approaching the World Cup, and we will have Sid and another special guest on to give you a betting guide or just an awareness guide on the World Cup. So tune in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Two Beers Till Takeoff. Do you want free additional content or just to stay connected with the show? Then give us a follow on our social media platform. That means TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of them. Are you in need of podcast production services, video editing, or anything in between? Then look no further than Strut Sound Productions, the official producer of the Two Beers Till Takeoff podcast. Music produced by Alex Gagné. Check out his work in our show notes. Voiceover done by Viking Leo K. See you next week on Two Beers Till Takeoff.